Mr. Stern was the kind of boss who believed his reflection held the secrets to the universe. He strutted through the office of Stern Solutions, a small tech firm specializing in app development, with an air of superiority that could curdle milk. He was convinced every idea that popped into his head was pure genius, even if it was just a slightly tweaked version of something he'd seen on the internet the day before. The truth, however, was far from his inflated self-image. Mr. Stern was utterly dependent on his assistant, Sarah. She was the oil that kept the gears of Stern Solutions turning smoothly. Sarah managed his schedule, proofread his emails, saving him from countless embarrassing typos, and, most importantly, translated his vague, often nonsensical instructions into actionable tasks for the development team. He treated her with a dismissive wave and a constant stream of demands, never once acknowledging her invaluable contributions. He'd bark orders like, "Sarah, make the thingamajig do the doohickey," and expect her to understand perfectly. And somehow she always did. He'd hired her fresh out of college, boasting to anyone who would listen that he had an eye for talent, when really he just needed someone to clean up his messes. Mr. Stern saw her as an extension of his phone, a tool to be used and discarded without a second thought. He was, in short, the textbook definition of an arrogant and out-of-touch boss. He really thought he was smart when it was actually Sarah who kept him afloat. Sarah, on the other hand, was the quiet force that held Stern Solutions together. She arrived early each morning, brewed the coffee Mr. Stern only drank the good stuff, a ridiculously expensive blend, and tackled the mountain of emails that had accumulated overnight. She was a master of organization, her desk a pristine oasis in the chaotic sea of Mr. Stern's office. But her skills went far beyond scheduling and correspondence. Sarah possessed a sharp intellect and a remarkable ability to anticipate problems before they arose. She understood the intricacies of the company's app development projects, often offering insightful suggestions that the engineers readily adopted. She was also a skilled negotiator, smoothing over ruffled feathers and resolving conflicts between team members. Despite her crucial role, Sarah remained largely invisible to Mr. Stern. He saw her as a glorified secretary, someone to fetch his coffee and type his memos. He never asked for her opinion, never acknowledged her contributions, and certainly never offered her a raise commensurate with her value. She found satisfaction in quietly keeping things running smoothly. She felt that if she did a good job, the business would do well and she would continue to have a job. However, deep down, a part of her longed for recognition, for Mr. Stern to finally see her as more than just a background character in his self-aggrandizing drama. She knew that she was more than just his assistant, she was the backbone of Stern Solutions. One Monday morning, a new face appeared in the office. It was Tim, a temporary worker assigned to help with some data entry. Tim was fresh out of school and eager to prove himself. He was a bit gangly, with perpetually nervous hands that seemed to have a life of their own. He wore a slightly too big suit and a tie that was knotted a little too tightly, giving him the air of a startled rabbit. Mr. Stern naturally took one look at Tim and decided he was utterly useless. Tim's nervousness only amplified Mr. Stern's disdain. He tripped over the welcome mat, nearly knocking over a stack of papers, and stammered when Mr. Stern asked him his name. "T.T. Tim," he squeaked, his voice cracking slightly. Mr. Stern rolled his eyes. "Wonderful," he muttered under his breath, loud enough for Sarah to hear. "Just what we need." Another stumbling block. He immediately wrote Tim off as incompetent, refusing to acknowledge his potential or the fact that everyone starts somewhere. Tim, oblivious to Mr. Stern's silent judgment, was determined to make a good impression. He peppered Sarah with questions, diligently taking notes and trying his best to absorb the information. He was a little clumsy, it was true, but he was also earnest and willing to learn. Unfortunately, Mr. Stern only saw the clumsiness, not the effort. This was going to make things difficult. The following week brought a crucial presentation for Stern Solutions. A potential investor, Mr. Abernathy, was coming to hear Mr. Stern pitch his latest app idea, a social media platform exclusively for cats. Mr. Stern was convinced it was $1 million idea, even though Sarah had gently pointed out that numerous similar apps already existed. He was a whirlwind of frantic energy, pacing his office and barking orders at Sarah. "Sarah, get me the Abernathy file. Now. And make sure the presentation slides are perfect. Absolutely perfect, do you understand? This is our chance to finally hit the big time." Sarah, as always, remained calm and efficient. She located the file, double-checked the slides, and even managed to anticipate several questions Mr. Abernathy might ask, preparing concise answers for Mr. Stern to memorize. She was basically writing and directing the whole show. Mr. Stern, however, took all her efforts for granted. He saw her diligence as simply fulfilling her job duties, not as the extraordinary effort it truly was. He continued to treat her like a servant, demanding coffee, snacks, and constant reassurance that he was brilliant and the presentation would be a success. The pressure was mounting and Sarah felt it but knew it was up to her to make things go smoothly, even if Mr. Stern would never give her the credit. Disaster struck the morning of the presentation. Tim, bless his well-meaning but clumsy heart, was tasked with bringing Mr. Stern his usual triple-shot espresso. He carefully navigated the office, trying to avoid any further mishaps. However, fate, it seemed, had other plans. As Tim approached Mr. Stern's office, his foot caught on a rogue power cord. He stumbled, the espresso flying from his hand in a dark, caffeinated arc. The coffee landed squarely on Mr. Stern's meticulously prepared presentation notes, soaking them completely. Mr. Stern erupted. "What have you done?" he roared, his face turning a shade of red usually reserved for fire engines. He snatched the ruined notes from the desk, the soggy paper dripping onto his pristine suit. "You incompetent fool. You've ruined everything." Tim, mortified, could only stammer apologies. "I am so sorry, Mr. Stern. It was an accident. I tripped." Mr. Stern wasn't listening. His carefully constructed facade of calm professionalism shattered completely. "Accident or not, you're fired. Get out. Get out of my sight before I call security." He was shaking with rage. The presentation was ruined, and in his eyes, Tim was solely to blame. He didn't care about accidents, he cared about his notes. And his precious presentation. And now everything was going down the drain. He was going to make sure Tim paid for this. Sarah watched the scene unfold with growing dread. She knew Mr. Stern's temper was volatile, but this was beyond the pale. As Tim scurried out of the office, tears welling in his eyes, Sarah stepped forward. "Mr. Stern," she said, her voice calm but firm. "You can't fire him like that." Mr. Stern turned to her, still fuming. "And why not? He ruined the presentation. He's clearly incompetent." Sarah took a deep breath. "Because," she said slowly, "Tim is Mr. Abernathy's nephew." Mr. Stern stared at her, his mouth agape. The color drained from his face. "What did you say?" "Tim," Sarah repeated, "is Mr. Abernathy's nephew. He mentioned it to me yesterday. He was hoping to impress his uncle." The realization hit Mr. Stern like a ton of bricks. He had not only fired a temporary worker, but he had also insulted and humiliated the nephew of the very investor he was trying to woo. His arrogance had blinded him to a crucial piece of information, and now he was facing the consequences. He could not believe what he had done. How could he be so stupid? All the color had drained from his face. He knew he was in trouble. Big trouble. But he was too arrogant to admit it. Not yet. Despite the shock, Mr. Stern's arrogance quickly resurfaced. He refused to admit he was wrong. "So what if he's Abernathy's nephew?" he scoffed, trying to regain his composure. "He still ruined my presentation. Abernathy will understand. Accidents happen." He was trying to convince himself more than Sarah. He then barked, "Sarah, make sure that clumsy oaf is gone immediately. I don't want to see his face again. And as for the presentation," he puffed out his chest, "I'll just have to wing it. I'm sure I can remember most of it." He was lying to himself. He knew he couldn't wing it. He needed those notes. Sarah knew better. She knew Mr. Stern was completely unprepared without his notes, and she knew Mr. Abernathy wouldn't be so understanding about his nephew's mistreatment. But Mr. Stern was too blinded by his own ego to see the disaster looming ahead. He was convinced his charm and brilliance would win Mr. Abernathy over regardless of the ruined notes or the fired nephew. He truly believed he was above consequences. "And Sarah," he added, turning back to her with a dismissive wave, "make sure you have everything ready for Abernathy. Coffee, snacks, the usual. And try not to mess anything up, unlike some people." He glared in the direction Tim had fled, completely missing the irony of his statement. The arrogance was astounding. Seeing the impending disaster, Sarah knew she had to act. She couldn't let Mr. Stern's arrogance ruin the company's chances. While he was busy pacing and muttering to himself, she discreetly excused herself and went to her desk. Under the guise of confirming the meeting time, she called Mr. Abernathy's office. Speaking to his assistant, she subtly steered the conversation towards Mr. Stern's unique management style. She hinted at the morning's events, carefully avoiding any direct accusations but painting a clear picture of Mr. Stern's unprofessional behavior and his mistreatment of a young, eager intern. She emphasized Mr. Stern's passionate personality, and his unconventional approach to business. Knowing these were polite ways of saying he was arrogant and out of touch. She also made sure to mention Tim's dedication and his desire to impress his uncle. Sarah hoped that this subtle nudge would give Mr. Abernathy a reason to pause and reconsider his investment. She knew it was a risky move, potentially jeopardizing her own job, but she couldn't stand by and watch Mr. Stern single-handedly destroy everything she had worked so hard to build. She had a feeling Mr. Abernathy would see through Mr. Stern's act. She just hoped it was enough. It was a gamble, but she was willing to take it. The day of the presentation arrived, thick with tension. Mr. Stern, dressed in a suit that seemed a little too tight after his frantic morning, greeted Mr. Abernathy with an overly enthusiastic handshake. "Mr. Abernathy, so glad you could make it." Ready to be amazed by the future of social media, he boomed, ushering him into the conference room. Inside, Sarah had arranged everything perfectly despite the chaos of the morning. Coffee was brewing, snacks were artfully displayed, and the presentation slides were ready to go. However, Mr. Stern's lack of preparation was immediately apparent. He launched into his pitch, but without his notes, he stumbled and faltered. He forgot key statistics, mispronounced industry terms, and generally presented a rambling, incoherent mess. He kept repeating the same points over and over again. He was sweating and nervous. Mr. Abernathy, who had already been briefed by his assistant, watched with a polite but increasingly skeptical expression. He asked pointed questions that Mr. Stern couldn't answer, revealing the shallowness of his understanding of the market. It was becoming clear that Mr. Stern was completely out of his depth. Sarah watched in dismay, knowing her gamble was about to pay off one way or another. This was the moment of truth. After what felt like an eternity of rambling and missteps, Mr. Abernathy finally held up his hand. "Thank you, Mr. Stern," he said, his voice polite but firm. "I think I've heard enough." Mr. Stern, momentarily stunned, stammered, but I haven't even gotten to the best part. The monetization strategy. The cat memes." Mr. Abernathy simply shook his head. "I appreciate your time, but I don't believe Stern Solutions is the right fit for my investment portfolio." He stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. Mr. Stern's face crumpled. But why? What did I do wrong?" Mr. Abernathy offered a tight smile. "Let's just say I value professionalism and respect in my business dealings." And he added, his eyes narrowing slightly, "I take very seriously the way people treat my family." He paused for a moment, letting his words sink in. With that, he turned and walked out of the conference room, leaving Mr. Stern speechless and utterly defeated. The deal was dead. Stern Solutions' future hung by a thread. Sarah's gamble had paid off, but the victory felt hollow. She knew what was coming next. As soon as Mr. Abernathy was gone, Mr. Stern turned on Sarah, his face contorted with rage. "This is all your fault," he screamed, his voice echoing through the empty conference room. "You sabotaged me. You deliberately ruined the presentation." Sarah, who had been quietly gathering her things, stopped and looked at him, her expression calm and unwavering. "How did I sabotage you, Mr. Stern?" she asked, her voice even. "Don't play innocent with me," he roared. "You knew I couldn't do it without the notes. You probably hid them yourself." He was grasping at straws, desperate to deflect blame from himself. "The notes were ruined by accident, Mr. Stern," Sarah replied. "As you well know, and I certainly didn't sabotage you. I did everything I could to prepare you for this presentation. The fact that you chose to ignore my advice and rely on your own inflated ego is not my fault." He advanced towards her, his eyes blazing. "You were always jealous of me. You wanted to see me fail." He was completely irrational, consumed by his own wounded pride. He refused to acknowledge his own shortcomings, preferring to blame the one person who had always been there to support him. The irony was completely lost on him. Sarah stood her ground, her voice steady despite Mr. Stern's outburst. "I didn't sabotage you, Mr. Stern. I simply made sure Mr. Abernathy was aware of your behavior." Mr. Stern stopped short, his brow furrowed in confusion. "What are you talking about?" Sarah took a deep breath. "I called Mr. Abernathy's office this morning," she said, her gaze unwavering. "I informed his assistant about your handling of the Tim situation." Mr. Stern's eyes widened in disbelief. "You did what?" "I told them about how you fired Tim, Mr. Abernathy's nephew, for a simple accident. I explained your unprofessional reaction. I wanted Mr. Abernathy to know the kind of person he was dealing with." A flicker of understanding finally dawned in Mr. Stern's eyes. He realized that Sarah hadn't sabotaged the presentation itself, but rather she had sabotaged him. She had revealed his true character to Mr. Abernathy, ensuring that he wouldn't invest in Stern Solutions. You betrayed me," he sputtered, his voice filled with indignation. "No, Mr. Stern," Sarah replied calmly. "I protected the company from you. Your arrogance and incompetence cost us a major opportunity. And frankly," she added, a hint of steel in her voice, "it was long overdue. The truth had been revealed." The weight of Sarah's words finally crashed down on Mr. Stern. He stood there, deflated, the anger slowly draining from his face, replaced by a dawning realization. He began to understand the extent of his mistakes. He had been so focused on his own brilliance, so convinced of his own importance, that he had completely overlooked the people around him. He had mistreated Sarah, the one person who had consistently supported him, and he had alienated a potential investor with his arrogance and impulsiveness. He looked around the conference room at the meticulously arranged snacks, the perfectly aligned chairs, the pristine presentation slides, all testament to Sarah's dedication and hard work. And he realized that he had done nothing to deserve it. For the first time, he saw Sarah not as a glorified secretary, but as a valuable asset, a skilled professional, and a decent human being. And he understood that he had not only lost a potential investment, but he had also lost her respect. The truth had finally hit him. He had no idea what he was doing. He had relied on Sarah the whole time. He was shocked and scared. What was he going to do without her? How would he run the business? He suddenly felt very small and very alone. The arrogance that had defined him for so long began to crumble, revealing the insecure and incompetent man beneath. The truth was starting to hurt. A lot. Just then, Sarah's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and saw it was Mr. Abernathy's office. She hesitated for a moment, then answered the call. "Sarah, this is Mr. Abernathy," the investor said, his voice surprisingly warm. "I wanted to apologize for the abrupt ending to our meeting. I also wanted to thank you for your candor." Sarah braced herself, unsure of what was coming next. "I was very impressed with your honesty and your dedication to Stern Solutions," Mr. Abernathy continued. "It's clear you're the one who really keeps that company running." He paused, then said, "I'm not going to invest in Stern Solutions, but I'm impressed by your skills and your work ethic. I need someone with your talents at my own company. I'd like to offer you a position as my executive assistant with a significant increase in salary and benefits. What do you say?" Sarah was stunned. She had expected to lose her job, not gain a better one. She looked at Mr. Stern, who was staring at her with a mixture of shock and desperation. This was her chance to escape his toxic environment and finally be recognized for her worth. This was her time. She smiled. "Mr. Abernathy," she said, her voice filled with newfound confidence, "I accept." Sarah gathered her belongings, a sense of liberation washing over her. She packed her desk with a newfound lightness, knowing she was leaving behind not just a job, but a whole chapter of her life. She glanced at Mr. Stern, who was still standing dumbfounded, a picture of utter despair. "I'll be sending my resignation letter," she said, her voice professional but devoid of any warmth. "I wish you the best of luck, Mr. Stern. Although," she added, a wry smile playing on her lips, "I suspect you'll need it." She walked out of the office, leaving Mr. Stern alone in the wreckage of his own making. Without Sarah, Stern Solutions quickly began to unravel. He couldn't manage his schedule, he couldn't communicate effectively with the team, and he certainly couldn't attract any new investors. The Cat's social media app, unsurprisingly, flopped. Without Sarah's guidance, the development team floundered and the app was riddled with bugs and glitches. Users quickly abandoned it and the project became a laughingstock in the tech community. One by one, the employees began to leave, seeking more stable and supportive environments. Mr. Stern was left with a skeleton crew and a rapidly dwindling bank account. His arrogance had finally caught up with him and he was paying the price. Stern Solutions was sinking fast. Eventually, the inevitable happened. Stern Solutions, once a promising tech startup, was forced to close its doors. Mr. Stern's arrogance and incompetence had finally caught up with him. He had lost his company, his employees, and his reputation. He was left with nothing but the bitter taste of regret. He was forced to sell his expensive car, his fancy apartment, and all the other trappings of his former life. He was humbled, but the hard way. He had to find a new job, and after numerous rejections, he finally landed a position as a low-level clerk at a small accounting firm. He was now answering to a kind and competent manager, a woman who valued teamwork and treated her employees with respect. Mr. Stern was forced to follow instructions, to take orders, and to acknowledge the contributions of others. It was a far cry from his days of barking orders and taking credit for everyone else's work. He learned to be humble, to be patient, and to listen to others. He learned that success wasn't about being the smartest person in the room, but about working together and treating everyone with respect. It was a hard lesson, but one he desperately needed to learn. He finally started to understand what Sarah had been trying to show him all along. He finally understood how important it was to be kind. Meanwhile, Sarah thrived in her new role at Mr. Abernathy's company. She quickly proved her worth, streamlining operations, improving communication, and earning the respect of her colleagues. Mr. Abernathy valued her skills and her judgment, and he made sure she knew it. She finally received the recognition she deserved, and she used her newfound influence to advocate for fair treatment and positive work environments. She made sure every employee felt valued and appreciated, learning from Mr. Stern's mistakes and creating a workplace where everyone could thrive. She learned new skills and took on new challenges, always pushing herself to learn and grow. She became a mentor to younger employees, sharing her knowledge and experience and helping them to reach their full potential. She occasionally thought about Mr. Stern, hoping that he had truly learned his lesson. She didn't harbor any ill will towards him, but she knew that he had to face the consequences of his actions. She hoped that he was on the path to becoming a better person. She had moved on and she was never looking back. She was finally happy. She had found her place. Years later, Sarah had become a successful consultant, using her skills and experience to help other companies thrive. She always remembered the lessons she had learned from Mr. Stern, and she made sure to create positive and supportive work environments wherever she went. Humility and respect became her guiding principles. One day, while attending a business conference, she saw a familiar face across the room. It was Tim, no longer the nervous temp worker, but a confident and successful young man. He was working for his uncle's company, and he had clearly found his place. Their eyes met and they both smiled, a knowing smile that acknowledged their shared experience. They had both escaped Mr. Stern's toxic environment and had gone on to achieve great things. They chatted briefly, reminiscing about the chaotic days at Stern Solutions and marveling at how far they had come. Tim thanked Sarah for standing up for him, and Sarah thanked Tim for accidentally spilling the coffee that had ultimately changed both of their lives for the better. As they parted ways, Sarah knew that she had made the right decision. She had stood up for what was right, she had taken a chance on herself, and she had created a better future for herself and for others. And Mr. Stern, in his own misguided way, had played a part in that. The arrogant boss had unknowingly paved the way for their success, paying dearly for his mistakes in the process. The end.